on tape.
Thank you all so much for being so patient. We have a really interesting, a little different event today. How many of you know Sunshine? Like a lot. Okay, so I'm going to say a couple of things about her, very short, but it feels like you probably already know much more about her than I do. So I met Sunshine because I've been working with Nancy Brown with the Publishers Club and trying to bring in different local, interesting authors that have a really good story to tell. And what I'm finding is there's more people than we could possibly handle that have really good stories to tell around here. So Sunshine has been here since 1995, and she started entertaining and bringing musical performances with her first husband here for over 10 years. Then she also started the Sunshine musical group, and they perform here once a month at lunch. And then she also started the Fit Brain Club in 2010. So she's getting a lot of people involved in being a part of the community. Then with her second husband, David Hartman, she produced a lot of musical variety shows for the community, and she's raised over $100,000 to support different charities, and that's all through audience donation and support from the community. So this is her thing that she has been doing since she has lost David, and her next chapter.
Yep.
Yes? This is Sunshine Lutey, and we're really proud.
Thank you so much. My title is Survival Through Writing. As I look at that title, I think about the meaning of the word survive. Actually, each of us works every day to survive the bad, even the good sometimes. So, why am I here sharing my books with you today? I'll tell you why. I found that writing helped me to survive. And I want to share with the world that survival is possible, even through extremely difficult circumstances. So onward with the show. The picture on the screen there shows a lot of journals, not all of them, but some of them. I discovered that journaling my thoughts and life events helped me, number one, to remember them, but then also to process difficult situations. I actually didn't begin journaling until I was 49 years old, but I could recall and write about the events of the prior years because they had been so indelibly burned into my brain. It has been proven that writing thoughtfully about feelings and reactions, journaling provides a path to growth, and I highly recommend it. I appreciate two friends who helped and nudged me towards writing and publishing. Phil Silverman, hi Phil, purchased a 2015 Publishing Club membership for me and told me, you should be part of this club and publish your material. The president of the club at that time, Peggy Edwards, agreed and encouraged me to write and publish. So 3 years later, 2018, I published my first book, Journey to Joy. It had 4 parts. In the first part, I shared stories from my childhood. When I was born, we became a family of 4. My parents, Walter and Jean Tyson, my sister, older sister, Waverly, and me. My birth name was Naomi. Our dad could make us children laugh with his antics, his wild antics, no matter how miserable or sad we were. He made foghorn sounds with a vacuum cleaner, all sorts of animal noises. He stood on his head. He walked on his hands. He chased us upstairs, grabbing at our ankles. And he told funny stories and jokes. One of his favorites, I only like 2 kinds of pie. We'd ask, what kind of pies, Daddy? Hot pie and cold pie. That was my dad. Daddy was agile. Here he is, jumping over a fence. Without the benefit of college or even high school, he only had an 8th grade education. Talented. I'm going to show you a couple of things that he did. Before 1938, he built what he called the first snowmobile. I called it, when I looked at it, an ice-mobile. He basically took an old cutter with runners, added an engine, the top of an airplane, and carved a propeller out of wood. He raced it across Mill Pond in Stanley, Wisconsin, and he told me he used a great big long stick for a brake and that it didn't work very well. He also said that the ice, the flying ice, made pits in the propeller, and he had to keep carving new propellers, so it wasn't really worth spending too much time on. Second home we lived in had no water. Daddy had to cart 10-gallon cans of water from a neighbor to our home. So you see what he did there. He built the scaffolding, he dug holes in the ground, he drilled for water 4 times before he got good, clean water. Actually, it was over a process of almost 3 years. We almost were ready to leave the place when we finally got water. Here we are. You see my older sister Waverly and me. We are now pumping water into the pail. Somehow or other, he routed the water from the well to the kitchen, where he built a counter. He built a sink and a pump, had drainage, and we had running water. So later in life, my parents bought this small cabin, not up on top of the screen. This is the home that he turned it into. It was magical. Also, he built a boat. He installed a motor. He built a trailer. He loaded the boat onto the trailer and hand-carted it across the road to the lake, where he gave the family boat rides on beautiful Spencer Lake. That was my dad, who in many ways helped us to survive. One Father's Day, after he was gone, I wrote a song to honor him. It was called I Admire My Daddy. My daddy was a special man and very much admired. To be in many ways like him was something I desired. I saw the many things he did, can't help but feel inspired. So many things I do not know, suddenly I'm tired. These abilities of his, how were they acquired? Perhaps I know, was it by necessity required? He was an expert for himself, he didn't need help hired. Like our home with no electricity, that's so perfectly he wired. I'd like to be my own expert. Again, I feel inspired. There's lots to learn, but in thinking of him, my ambition's been refired. Thank you. On the other side of the coin, our mother's life experiences damaged her sense of well-being. We never knew why. We only knew she had a problem, and it became our problem. It was her need for perfection. Jean's parents had expected her to go to Cornell University, the university from which the women in her family had graduated. Despite her parents' objections, Jean graduated from high school and decided to marry Walter. I think she liked his sense of fun, even though she fought against it all her life. After a train ride to a religious meeting, a revival meeting, if you've ever heard of one of those, she envisioned a future where Walter was a minister. She was certain her parents would approve of him, if that were true. With determination, but very, extremely limited patience, she worked to change her vision into reality. She also researched how he could become a minister without a degree from a seminary. I have an excerpt from Journey to Joy. Waverly was 8 and I was 3. Evenings, Waverly and I helped to prepare the table for dinner. Waverly set the dishes and I set the silverware. If we did the job perfectly, Mother would allow us to meet Daddy on his way home from work. We finished the job and were ready. "Can we go now?" Waverly softly asked. Mother nodded her assent. We hurried out the door. Waverly went first and I ran after her. Waverly sprang back to catch the screen door. "Naomi, if we let the screen door bang, we won't get to meet Daddy and we'll get razor strapped." So sobered for a moment by the near disaster, I walked slowly with my head bowed. But she grabbed my hand and we ran to meet Daddy. When we got to the corner, we saw him. He was all in white coverall, walking. I could see him coming underneath the canopy that went over the sidewalk. And when he saw us, he grinned widely. He handed Waverly his lunch pail. He picked me up. He grabbed Waverly's hand and he so happily and so proudly walked us home. At the table, a delicious meal waited. Daddy exclaimed, "Boy, I'm hungry." But Mother interrupted before he could say anything more. "It's not becoming to exclaim boy." "Yeah, well," Daddy continued with a chuckle, "Jed had no lunch, so I gave him part of my sandwich. You should have seen his face. He were plumb happy." Mother interrupted again, her voice harsh. "You shouldn't say he were plumb happy. You should say he was happy." Daddy shrugged his shoulders, took a huge mouthful, and replied with a mushy, "Yeah." Mother took a deep breath. Furiously, she berated Daddy. "I'm trying to help, and you don't even care, and you don't try to change." That was evening meal at our house. Amazingly, and this is truly amazing, my dad eventually acquired ministerial credentials with a small religious group. My mother's painful manipulations led him to a life where he had honor and recognition. Through the years, he pastored at 4 churches. His congregations loved him. Daddy's first church was the country church where we had no water. The second church was in Marinette, Wisconsin, and you can see now the family has grown to a family of 5 with my little sister Belle. His third church was way up north again, still in Mellon, Wisconsin, and now we are the final family of 6 with my little brother Tim. Daddy's fourth and final church was in Kaukauna, near Green Bay. After achieving success with her vision, our mother's harsh criticism continued. She monitored our behavior and found infractions that resulted in almost daily razor strappings. Her control increased as we grew older. Other than attending public school, she kept us isolated from the outside world. I sometimes rebelled and had to face the consequences. I wasn't too smart that way. My older sister was smarter than me. Our mother controlled our lives totally. We saw our dad as weak because he didn't stand up for us. Often my sister and I would look at each other eyes wide with things we wanted to say, but we never said them. Not even when Mother demanded, "What are you thinking?" "Nothing, Mother." 30 years later, Waverly and I finally shared our thoughts and feelings. It was heart-rending, but heartwarming. We cried, we laughed, and we held on to each other for dear life. Immediately after I finished high school, I broke free and left home. I didn't want to be like either of my parents, and I wanted nothing to do with their religion. But I felt sad and apologized for my rebellious behavior. My mother responded, "It's my fault because I failed to break your will." Several months later, my dad found me in a bar. With tears rolling down his cheeks, he grimly announced, "I wish you had died when you were a good Christian." I hated leaving my younger sister and brother to fend for themselves, but I had to go. Totally unprepared for life, I had no idea how to live or how a healthy, loving relationship worked. But I wanted love. I'd always wanted love. Who doesn't? And part one ends with me meeting and marrying my first husband, Lloyd. In part two, I talk about Lloyd's early years and tell some of the stories that he told me. He struggled with and met many challenges because at birth, a forceps delivery cut the nerves on the left side of his face. He couldn't close his left eye, and the left side of his mouth drooped more through the years. Additionally, he survived in a home with an extremely controlling and abusive father. So he had an abusive father, I had an abusive mother, and we grew up and said we'd never be like them. Part two ends with Lloyd and me getting together. And here's the strange thing. After Lloyd left home, his father got religion and became a minister in the same kind of church as my dad was. Both of our fathers married us. In part three, I share stories from Lloyd's and my 43 years of marriage. When we met, Lloyd shared his stories of pain and endurance. I admired his strength in handling his problems. I felt sad about his struggles, and I came to love him deeply. He had grown into a self-reliant and kind man with plans for our future and a sense of humor besides. He was my strongest supporter and best friend and suggested a plan for both of us to go to college, for having children. He even suggested, "Naomi, if you don't like your name, do something about it." So in 1965, I legally changed my birth name from Naomi Lois to Terry Lynn. There's more to the story, you know. Initially, but unknowingly, I exchanged one unhealthy, abusive relationship for another. My mother no longer controlled me, but Lloyd did. Damaged by his and our early years, he became extremely possessive, jealous, and domineering. When angry, he verbally abused me with very vicious name-calling and emotionally abused me by shutting me out. Initially, I accepted his control because I loved him intensely. And even when it felt wrong, I felt I deserved it. We struggled to overcome the damage of our early years and to succeed in our personal lives. In 1968, Lloyd contacted a surgeon who implanted a muscle from his thigh into his cheek, and that was to control the droop in his left side of his face. It wasn't supposed to leave any scars, but it did. But still, Lloyd felt much better about his appearance. I eventually became stronger, which explains my very first journal entry. I will no longer take abuse. I did get stronger. Living far from my mother's negativity as we raised our own children, I thought of some of her positive attributes. She was an extremely good cook and fed us, even when there was almost no money to do it with. I don't know how she did it. She created beautiful matching sister dresses for us, often from flour sacks. And in the final picture, right there, my little sister Beth even has a sister dress. When we were babies, I remember, she rocked us and sang to us. She also had organizational talents, which I finally realized I had inherited. 10 years after I left home, I reconnected with my parents. Our college psychology courses helped both Lloyd and me to understand that our parents did the very best that they could with the knowledge that they had. I feel fortunate because we established peaceful weekly phone calls long before my mother passed away. She eagerly listened to my stories about our children's adventures without a word of criticism, except for when she yelled, "Walter, stop breathing!" Now this is kind of funny. She had a very, very good sense of hearing, and when Daddy was on the extension phone breathing into the phone, she heard him and it bothered her. It bothered me a lot at the time, but I never said anything about it because I was just happy that we could talk. Actually, sometimes my sisters and I, my brother, when we remember that particular phrase, we can't help but giggle. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. By the time Lloyd and I moved to Leisure World in 1995, we had mellowed. Our fights were few, and only about Lloyd's occasional bouts of jealousy. During those final 10 years, which he described as the best years of his life, we performed small musical shows and traveled. We had a small musical group that performed shows for clubs and outside facilities. When Lloyd became critically ill, we had high hopes for his survival, but I lost him at age 66 in 2005. In part 4, I share David's and my story. David lost his wife the same year I lost Lloyd. He played golf with Lloyd. After Lloyd's death, David and I became a village love story. Yeah, we did. I quickly recognized a talented speaker and singer with a rich and resonating baritone voice. I added him to the musical shows where he performed beautifully as MC and entertainer. He included me in the Senior Olympic competitions. See all the medals around my neck? I was having fun. I discovered a kind and loving man and quickly fell in love with him. He gave me unconditional love without a trace of jealousy. I kind of like that. He took me to his favorite restaurants, taught me to play billiards, encouraged me to play golf tournaments. He even encouraged me to accept a lead part in a theater guild play. I found all the new activities very exciting. I had found true happiness, but I had been married for 43 years and I wasn't comfortable sharing my life with David without marriage. When I look at it today, I don't know why, but that's how I felt. So, David saw no need for marriage. I spent 2 years alternating between absolute joy and extreme despair. Same with happiness. He loves me so much. And with misery, but not enough to marry me. Yep. In 2007, David suggested we form a club in the village and name it, guess what? Sunshine Performance Club. He had the idea for future shows in Clubhouse 3, shows for the community, a platform for talented performers, and a way to raise funds for charity. That was only his idea, and I was so proud of him. In 2008, David finally told me he wanted to get married. Woohoo! We married between the first and second benefit shows. In my second book, Sunshine Stories, I share stories and poems about my first and second marriage and the story of my name changes, ending with my final change to Sunshine, which became legal in 2016. I also shared anecdotes about several crazy experiences I had while working with village management to create the musical benefit shows. Some of them were pretty funny. I published Sunshine Stories 3 just a few months ago in September of 2023. I continue to tell stories of David's and my life. We sheltered and continue to enjoy our time together using our survival skills, even though many of our activities were limited, just like everybody else. Then David's health began to falter, and I severely injured myself. Our needs were met through caring family members and outside help. Just as we were both beginning to improve, life was getting good, David fell. I lost him within days of the fall. I kept my sanity by working night and day to prepare for a move back to the home that I had shared with Lloyd, and to plan for David's celebration of life. Many honored David at the celebration. His youngest son, Rick Hartman, welcomed the audience doing yo-yo tricks across the stage, just as his dad had performed when opening the Sunshine Performance Club benefit shows. The show concludes with 2 of David's stories and some poetry. One more book to talk about. The book I just published last month on survival through poetry came into being because of all the poetry I wrote after losing David. The first 5 poems in the new book actually were included in Sunshine Stories 3. After I lost David, I was suddenly hit with a heavy, heavy load of grief. It wasn't just losing David. All of a sudden, I was feeling the loss of Lloyd as well, and even more, I was feeling the loss of, let me see, how can I say this? It was like my identity as a producer of the Sunshine benefit shows that I'd done for so many years. And I'd actually stopped production of these shows when the pandemic came, but I didn't feel the loss then. I was busy. I was doing all these other things. Then, at the end of 2022, I turned the presidency of my clubs over to other people. And now, that felt like a loss too. All of this led to depression and diminished confidence and vitality. But I would have never admitted being depressed, not me. I've got a smile. You know I do. Writing poems about my pain and loss and trying to find a way to survive helped me to process my experiences and come to a better understanding of who I was becoming. And here I am, on an open road, still finding my way. And as I talk to others, I find I'm not alone. Many, many others still are trying to find a good pathway. Because I want to be helpful to others. I hope my stories show that survival is possible no matter how dire the circumstances. In closing, the time I spent in this community, 29 years since 1965, truly have been the best years of my life. And for that, I first thank my family and each of you, because you've been a part of it. That's the end of the story for now. My books are right back there on the table if you're interested in them. But first, if you have any questions, Marcia's right there to try to interpret them for me, because sometimes my hearing fails me. So, are there any questions?
During the Q&A session, several audience members shared their stories about how they came to understand that there were underlying reasons for unseemly behavior by their parents, and realized, as I did, that the parents had done as well as they could. Both Marcia Hackett and I talked about the benefits available to members of the Publishing Club, a source of information about writing and publishing. Towards the end of the discussion, Doug Custins, a musical director and teacher, was credited for his contribution to the village. He helped many of his students increase their singing skills, including me.
You know what? I think it's come time for the book raffle.
Yep.
So, the folks who got the tickets, thanks for calling and signing up and everything. You can do the honors of pulling the ticket. And I just want to mention too, if you don't have our schedule, I see some faces that I recognize, but if you don't have our schedule of activities, or you'd like to receive our newsletter on email, stop at the front desk. You can get a copy of the schedule of activities where we have wonderful things going on each month, such as, special times like Sunshine coming in, and we have classes with Emeritus and a few other things going on, as well as our lunch program. So please stop by and grab one and, pass it on to a friend. But thank you all for coming.
I'm going to only read the last three numbers.
Yep, grab your tickets.
105.
Oh, sorry. Yay, so good.
I will.
What did she get today?
She gets my latest book, and I will find my pen, and I will endorse it for you.
You can have it on as long as you guys need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, I had a lot of good things happen to me here in this world, in this village. It's been a really good experience for me. All the relatives will. And thank you for coming, guys.